Hello, this is Lisa Lee, and welcome to this week's enrichment reading. So we are working with Sofia, but we have a little bit of a guest appearance, and it's unusual. It's kind of fascinating the way that this came through. You know, Sofia was teaching me about the technology of like how art, like when we think about spiritual technology, which I talk about constantly, spiritual technology in the sense that all art was developed of spiritual play, that very naturally like forms of like worship were developed, and then creativity, and that. So when you think about like art as all of the ways in which art is like an expression of inspiration, that inspiration is like the genius, that like whispering force of like, where did it come from? That inspiration comes through, and then before we know it, divinity is upon you in one way or another. So there's this notion of like how art is magic. It's what's left of magic. It was developed. All forms of art were developed as forms of magic. And so she was talking to me about, or showing me this notion of like mythology and story, and the way that people understood mythology and story was to think of it like a cavern that you climb into, and you place yourself like within the voice of like the story, and the experience of the story, and get catharsis. And so that these forms of magic, as they were developing in antiquity, we're developing around like technologies of catharsis and release, and ecstasy, and connectedness. Like all these like aspects like came together, and they would express as art, but they were considered magic. They were considered to have magical properties from the different gods, you know, the energy of love, and the energy of wisdom coming together in an alchemical way in terms of a story. And then the person walks through the story, and on the other side of the story, they have the elements of the story now within them, and they're integrated into their experience and their perspective. And so, you know, that she was showing me that to take stories literally is such a misuse of the magic, and that to use story as like a vehicle and a tool is like how it was developed and what it's meant to do. And so as she was showing me this, and she kind of showing me all the ways in which mythology, you know, builds on itself and comes from like taking one story and putting it in together with another story to create a different story that creates a different release and catharsis and feeling, and, you know, and all of the ways in which telling stories about gods were about like using the different alchemical energies in a way that like would produce a knowing or an understanding or a gnosis. And so as she's telling me this stuff, you know, and it comes in this stuff comes through like during a week where, you know, the perspective and what I'm seeing as like a landscape, a spiritual landscape, is kind of disheartening, and, you know, it's inducing like anger and despair. But what she's showing me, and what she has been showing me is that there's a much bigger picture that we're meant to be able to participate in. And so all that to say that there was an energy that showed up in this process, and I was very hesitant, extremely hesitant to even acknowledge it. But, you know, it was one of these things where, you know, if Sofia lets something through, and I trust her wisdom, and I trust what she's doing, and I trust the way that she exposes me to different things too. Because a lot of times Sofia will expose me to something that I think is like, what are you doing? Like, why would you let that be there? Like, why aren't you intervening? And it's all for the purpose of like a greater lesson. And so she'll let things through. And so I was aware of this energy coming in. I saw it. I had previously like done a very specific ban on, like, for myself. Like, I myself decided at a certain point that I didn't want, I wanted there to be more female guides, because I noticed that even though I work with female deities almost exclusively, most of my guides growing up and throughout my life had been like male, right? And I noticed this, and as I noticed that, it came to me in like a series of revelations, not just through me, but through a lot of different places. And a lot of different, like, you know, Spirit basically put together a lot, like layering of showing me a much bigger picture than I had ever like realized in the way of influence and infrastructure. And it was disheartening, you know, it was kind of made me upset. And so I immediately like not banned, but I asked my male guides to step back, and I asked female guides to step forward. And so when this deity came through, I was like, nope, I'm not dealing with males. I'm only talking to female energies. I'm only like having, you know, like wisdom from divine feminine energies. And Sofia was like, who's in charge, right? And so Sophia is allowing for this energy to interact with this reading for the purpose of bringing us into almost like a non-dualistic grittiness in order to kind of like help us with the notion of story and what story does and what different energies do, and the deity that we are having almost like a guest appearance or a guest joining us. It's amazing the way that you know, I work, and sometimes like different pantheons will kind of like, you know, where they shouldn't play nice together, like with whatever it is that spirit has me doing, like the rules do tend to like not be rigid at all. There's not a literalist kind of way in which this happens. So Dionysus is the energy that is here with us for this reading, and Sophia is part of it. So she's kind of like orchestrating whatever this conversation might be and whatever is coming through. And so I'm just going to go a little bit farther and get some more cards. And so that's the energy that is kind of like making its guest appearance with what Sophia is wanting to teach us or show us. And what's interesting about this energy, because I really don't have that much, like, you know, when I did do some research, I was a little bit like, like really, but this is going to be the story structure that created the story structure that we're so familiar with in terms of Jesus, is going to be that, like, because the Jesus story and the Christ story, like, so Sophia was talking about mythology and she was talking about Christ and she was talking about the layering and the way that the amalgamation and the alchemy and the catharsis and the purposes and like how it all kind of works. And Dionysus sort of came up as like a part of this Jesus Christ kind of like the resurrecting God, or the God that comes down and lives a human life, the God that is a suffering God. And so like there is that aspect to this information as it's coming through. So let's get some more cards and see where we're going with this, because I was hesitant. I was kind of like a little surprised, to say the least. Yeah, a little worried. So let's see what we have here. You know, what are we bringing through? And there's almost a personal address here. You know, this is an energy that's saying like you, oh, look at that. So I started noticing Dionysus, like just, I'd be like, wow, that's a deity. Like what's going on here? Like why is that energy here? And I had forgotten that as part of one of my meditations, I said, I sent a kind of like a word into the universe. I said to the universe, because I was one of these amazing, I'm working with these amazing, like very like elder channeling, like I guess they were called sibyls in their day, like really old women who channeled. They're beautiful energies. And one of them was like, was looking at me and she was regarding me with like, you're a very old soul. And I was like, yeah, I feel it. You know, I feel kind of, and she's like, no, you are an old soul. So she kept on kind of repeating to me that my soul was old, that it was ancient. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. And in the meditation, sort of like as I was coming out of it, sort of just musing, allowing my mind to run around like a little puppy, I said to the universe, I said, you know, whoever knows my soul, whatever deities like are familiar with the ancient soul that I am, please come forward. I need you. I want to be in communication with you. If you know my soul as a friend from antiquity, like if you understand like what I don't know in the way of my soul's trajectory, like let's hang out. And so like that's part of what called this energy in too, is that this energy seems to know my soul. And so this energy is kind of sort of, there is a personal aspect to this message that says, you know, and it's not just for me, like nothing about the work that we do is random or, you know, by accident. Like this is obviously a piece of alchemy, and then the energy of Dionysus is a piece of alchemy that this work needs right now. And so with the Ace of Coins and the Nine of Wands, like the amount of opposition that has been faced by this collective is pretty significant. And so this energy is coming in to say that there's a familiarity that says, not only do I know who your soul was in antiquity, and I guess that's like a little bit more personal, but this energy is saying like broader, because we are a collective. But like I've watched this whole experience that you've been having. Like I've been with you, and you are a master of chaos, and there's a reason why I'm comfortable, you know, or in your journey, or viewing your journey, or experiencing your journey as you do. And so also like there's this energy's coming through and saying that like Dionysus is a story. He's almost saying, I am a story structure that invites you in to like operate in various ways to get to whatever level of, you know, gnosis, or knowing that my influence can provide you. But there is this way in which like what you have been through, what you have been forced to endure is not seen as light, and it's not even seen as insignificant. And there isn't like a goofiness around it. There's not a lightheartedness around it. There is a stern, like, I understand the part of you that is the suffering. I am like with you in solidarity around the suffering. So this energy says like, I understand the suffering. I am the God that suffers. I am the God of death and rebirth, a God that is being reborn. And so this notion of you having to, like, this is like ego death after ego death after, like being like a pearl, you know, that piece of sand that like, it takes a lot in order to sort of become what you are, but this energy has been here for it and like witnessing it. And there's something about the duality here. Now, the star and the strength really does speak to like your elevation. And there's like good news too. Like this is an energy that's saying, and I need some water. This is an energy that's sort of saying that like your rise is significant. I gotta get more cards because like I get a little dizzy because like this 5 of coins, like it is a prognosis, and so you might be in a point in your life right now where you might be facing something in the way where like the prognosis doesn't look good, and how that would translate, or like what that would sort of, you know, be expressed as is just looking at the world and looking at your place in it and feeling like there's just nothing here that's worth salvaging. This is the prognosis is bad. Get me off this train. I don't like this store anymore. Whatever I signed up for, like I rescind. You know, like there is like this kind of feeling of despair around like the experience of what would be an endless struggle without a broader perspective that we're being asked to enter. You know, so where Sofia is saying like we are very much a part of like an active war. You know, Sofia is the first one to say that like if it looks like all is not right in the world, it's because there's not all right in the world. If it looks like things are out of balance, it's because they're out of balance. If things are out of balance, that there's a reason. If there's a reason, then there's a problem. So like Sofia, you know, is teaching us that, you know, when we look at some level of duality in terms of good and evil is what she's bringing in. Whereas Dionysus is saying, yes, but like what you see in terms of like, you know, how good and evil might operate, and like what is the broader picture and your place in that, it's not what you think or understand exactly. So there's like this gritty kind of a quality to the experience of enlightenment that isn't just like light, bright, white, light, bright, white, light, bright, white. And we know that because this collective does do the work, and this collective is not bypassing anything. But, you know, when it comes to like, you know, states of ecstasy, and when it comes to the experience of, you know, spiritual development through insane amounts of suffering and grief, that's part of like the majesty and the beauty of it all in its own way. And so it's like where Sofia is saying there is good and evil, and then she's allowing for the influence of Dionysus to come in and say, and it works in a way that's slightly different than you're evaluating it. But that your strength and your evolution and like your rise, like, because I am seeing like this notion of like you are like that which rises again. You are that which, you know, has experience and has enough experience of rebirth And then Dionysus is saying, wherein my energy is presence. The alchemy of like death and rebirth is me. And so like when you've had a death and a rebirth, like that whole process has been facilitated by the energy that is me. So you are not far into this energy, nor should you necessarily be afraid of it. But we have learned in this collective how to handle things with a little bit more like, you know, not being naive. So that's part of our lesson. That's part of our learning curve. And there is this aspect of like, you know, why we have opposition, why we experience opposition, why we can even get lost in opposition sometimes, is because it's part of what strengthens us, and it's part of what gives our experiences. Like I'm seeing spicing meat, you know, or like there's something to that. So there's congratulations in terms of your strength in the rise again, but you're also like participating in a, like right now you are doing a rise again. You like it's, I'm seeing the butterfly hanging off of the cocoon, like it, as it first comes out of the cocoon. Yeah, that's really cool. So I'm seeing the cocoon, I'm seeing the butterfly burst out, and I'm seeing that its wings are not like unfurled yet. They're still tightly like wound, and that the caterpillar has to eat this leaf. Yeah, I've seen this before. This is cool. So the caterpillar has to eat the leaf in order for those wings to open up. And so you are in this point of transformation where you're on the outside of what you understood to be everything, and you're seeing a different vantage point, and that new vantage point just feels really cold, feels really overwhelming. And it's like all of that work to transform in the cocoon, and now like I'm just hungry and cold, and like this is not what I signed up for. That's this moment with that 5 of coins. But what this what Dionysus is saying is wait for the nourishment, because those wings are going to flop open and you're going to be able to move with them. So with this death card here and the abundance card right above it, the transformation that you are undergoing right now, it's not you, it's not just you. There is a large collective of people like in this transformative process. And I know that for a fact because the work that I've been doing lately, I've been able to almost kind of pinpoint like a power structure and where those like different players are located and what's operating, you know, in opposition, and like how this opposition isn't quite what we think it is. But it's actually, you know, what Dionysus is showing me and what I've been able to see is that the trick is it's not that this has been hard, right? This has been difficult. The Spirit is basically showing me that the mother's wisdom operates in such a way that you might be surprised about who's being tricked and who's the trickster. Unknowingly, like the alchemy of what you are and what you're capable of in relationship with other energies and other people, like has an effect on like altering the course. So, I mean, that's something to look at in a second. But with this 2 of coins and this 3 of swords, I just want to feel this. There's a choice to be made about this broken heart and the story around this broken heart. So let's get some more cards. Let's take a look. Let's sort of try to organize this in almost a different way. I'm almost being guided to sort of go like one row at a time. And I'm going to do it like this so we have plenty of room. And I'm going to straighten this because that's, there we go. This energy saying like I know you, like it's almost saying like I've known you since the womb. So with the Ace of Coins being about the path that's yours, the path that's belongs to you, that is the divine path that meant for you. The divine path that was meant for you, that is yours, is one that is filled to the brim with like battles that would have been advanced with the effort to destroy you, but they couldn't, unable to. Yeah, so like in the realm of good and evil, like those very trifling energies that, so I'm being shown like, wow, I'm sorry, I'm seeing something so hard to look at in a kind of a way, but you know, I'm seeing like dimensions, like I'm seeing dimensions, okay? Like, so think about like dimensions as being stacked dimension 1, dimension 2, dimension 3, like stacked diagonally, and that at each dimension there's energies that are there to keep you stuck in that dimension, so they can continue to have you there, to operate with you, to do whatever it is in that dimension that they're doing, and to keep you from elevating to the next dimension, because essentially every time you elevate to the next dimension, they become irrelevant. They can't really access you to the extent that they try to cling to you, like in all actuality, just by picking your head up and being where you are. Those attachments just kind of fall away. And so there are always energies that seek to attach to you at whatever dimension you're working your way through, and keep you where you are. And that's part of like the initiation process, is being able to sort of identify, like move past and like continue on your way. And so what I'm seeing here in terms of your path is like you have been climbing, you know, that you've been going through the ranks at a level that is like incredibly impressive, and really, really difficult, and entailed a lot of suffering. But there is something to be said for like, and this is your path. This was your destiny. This is your path. Like the hardships, like that might be hard for you to swallow. Like there is like a, oh, don't tell me that. I don't want to, you know, some kind of a, you know, doctrine of like suffering is for learning, but it is, and it was. And that's what this energy of Dionysus is almost coming in to say. And what Sofia is saying is like you the alchemy of what you are and what you're capable of, and the love that you inspire makes you the kind of enemy that can't be overcome in a certain kind of way. Let me take a look and see what that is. You are like so loved and beloved, and that's a power. That you are so loved, that you are so beloved, is a level of power that you don't understand. It is like the biggest, most invincible sword to wield. So this energy is saying, you know, this is Sofia who's saying, you know, in terms of a battlefield, when the strongest, most powerful sword that you can yield is your love for yourself and the love that you inspire in others towards you, it means that nothing that loves you, like I'm seeing somebody with a superpower of being lovable, and that everything that comes against you, like your superpower is being so lovable that they put their sword down. They're not going to stab you. They love you, and that's a type of warfare and a type of strategy that is in a kind of way unbeatable. And the way to do that is to become such a person of character that you're inspiring even in the worst of enemies a type of admiration. And so that's Sophia coming in to say, like, you know, just when you think that you understand like how the game is played, like there are all these wild cards that sort of come up. So let me take a look and see what's and she's saying that doesn't mean that these attacks weren't vicious, that these energies weren't willing to try and kill you and test themselves at like how much they could or couldn't come up against you. And the energy of Dionysus is almost saying, you know, that's not just a superpower. That's actually like who you are. And I'm hearing, oh, such a time as this. And so, you know, when we think about stories and operating through stories, I'm actually being shown the story of Esther as being like a really good example of this. So the story of Esther in the Bible, if you don't know it, I don't remember that well, but I'm getting the channeled message that like this story is significant to that story. Wait, what? No, yeah, what I'm being shown is that like the story of Esther, where unknowingly the king picks her, falls in love with her, in love with Esther. So the king picks Esther, he falls in love with her. He's her, she's his wife, and he's madly in love with her. And then the genocide that was planned for her people, when he goes to sign the death warrant for all of her people, she says, listen, I know that you didn't know this, but I'm actually, those are my people. I'm one of them. If you kill them, you have to kill me. And that's what won the war. Her people didn't get killed. The person calling for her people to get killed got killed because he loved her. And it was like all a ruse. And so basically what Sofia is saying, and what this energy of Dionysus is coming in to say in terms of like just that sometimes we don't understand that's what strategy is and like what it means. And sometimes we don't understand what we're doing and what our role is in all of this. And so with that energy of Neptune, what is in the mystery, in the darkness, oh my God, wow. Well, we're definitely working with Dionysus because we've got the moon, we've got chaos, we've got Neptune, all coming out together. Bottom of the line, we have resin. So this is a new deck. I got an alchemy deck because we're working with Sofia and she's all alchemy all the time sometimes. So your path, you know, and so like Neptune, like this is Pisces, this is mysticism, and the moon is going to be mystery also. And so there's a lot that you don't understand about who you are, what you're capable of, and the alchemy, like that we come into the world as souls to bring a certain alchemy that has potential for change, has potential to overcome, and that this Nine of Wands speaks of this chaos, speaks of this unknowing, and everything that has had the advantage in coming against you because of all those things that you couldn't see clearly. And I'm seeing that scene in what is that movie? It's not Lord of the Rings. R.R. Martin, Game of Thrones. There's a character in the Game of Thrones who at a certain point she's blindfolded and she has to learn how to fight without her eyesight. And so this energy is saying was you. And that was your life experience was, and especially spiritually, like with the potency of what you're holding, has been a lot of, in fact, this energy of Dionysus is saying that's the whole experience. That's been your whole experience, blindfold. And if you haven't seen that show, Google the scene because it's really significant. I don't know the name of the character, but she's like the youngest daughter of like the Winter clan, and she's got it blindfold and she's having to learn without, you know, to fight back with all of her other senses, with no sight. And so this has been your experience. And your energy, like in the chaos, has had a taming kind of effect. Now let me get some more cards on this because I want to see a little bit closer, you know, what we're looking at. You know, I always let the energy that I'm going to be working with, the energies I'm going to be working with, pick the decks. And these are some really interesting decks we've got here. So let me get some cards from the tarot cards. Is that over here? No, not those. These. Okay. So what do you mean by Neptune, the moon, and chaos here in relationship to your path, your story, the genre of the story that you're a part of, the genre of the juncture in like your soul's evolution also? And so like, you know, I am seeing initiations, and I am seeing like every turn of the wheel, and I'm also seeing that like as being a lifespan. You know, every lifespan does have like its purpose. It's like alchemical potential, and also like that which it needs to accumulate or find or move through in order to advance in a certain way. And you have been like at this, like you entering into a genre that's not going to be rom-com. You know, it's not the romantic comedy. It's some other like thrilling kind of something, but that is not something to be angry at. That the story that you find yourself in is just that, but that you are actually the actor, like moving through it, you know. So I'm seeing that like the way that like we understand story and like what it is to like go into a story, like experience the experience of the characters through their perspectives, and then have level of catharsis and growth like in that vehicle, in that technology of faith, in that spiritual technology, that also like, you know, the wider lens can be brought over our life experience. And it's a healthy way of doing it, to bring that wider lens over the stories that we experience and say, these stories are not me, and these stories are like I'm moving through them for the experience of X, Y, and Z, and to not get so angry at the story and so angry at what causes it, because it's up to you to sort of be able to manipulate and change and like have power within that story. But it's not up, but it doesn't make sense to curse the story. And I'm seeing actually like, I'm seeing a lot of biblical stuff. Jonah by the tree, cursing the tree for not providing shade. That's what it's like to curse the circumstances that you find yourself in without that broader view of like, okay, I'm here to impact this story, and how am I going to do it? And like, what does it mean for me to experiencing myself as an agent of power in the circumstance in the story, and instead of an agent of like, and victimized by it. All right, let's get some more cards on this. So the Hanged Man, the Empress, the Ace of Love, the Ace of Cups, the Six of Swords, the Four of Coins, and the Knight of Wands. And the Page of Swords. So you very specifically hold a message that has and you know, this is this collective. I am talking to a collective of messiahs. So the definition of messiah is the messenger, right? So what Spirit is saying is there are those of you that come into this world to deliver, like, that you're holding, like I see someone holding like a precious gem, and you hold this precious gem within you, and that's going to be the message. But the message isn't, it's something, the message is in you in the way of perspective and wisdom, and like this is the message that you're meant to deliver, but it has to develop through the experiences that you have. And in order to reveal the message, you have to live through these experiences, make meaning of these experiences, and the meaning that you make of these experiences, that technology of taking an experience, putting it into story form in one way or another, and then having meaning be extracted from it, that's like part of your purpose in like a very, very big way. And so like as a messenger, as a messiah, someone who brings a message, you're meant to be looking at your life as like fertile with potential for like bringing the meaning and the message. Like everything that you went through is like another piece of alchemy that like adds strength to the power of whatever it is that you're meant to express. And so with the, let's just move these over a little bit. And I want I really want this collective to be very careful. You know, it's like we work with deities, and this is a cool process, but there's also something to be said for being mindful when you're getting a message how do I even say that? Because, you know, this is kind of a tough, for such a mystical spiritual group, you know, there's almost like this, this risk involved with trying to skip before you can run, and that's like a weird like image that's coming through. You're just there's just a way in which like this is a group, and it is a schoolfish, and we're all in various like different places, but to be very careful about your influences, and to be very careful about how you approach different deities, because again, like, you know, you're calling in, and like when you call in a deity, or when you're working with a deity, they're bringing an alchemy to whatever it is that you're creating, that you want to be consciously aware of, and also like, you know, like be mindful. You're not to call in energies of like chaos unless you feel way too bored and calm and like need something to you know, break something open. Like, so, you know, part of what we're doing when we learn, you know, how to use alchemy and how to work with different energies, and those different energies like representative as different deities through different stories, is to be very careful about the way that we interact with this stuff, to make sure that we're very intentionally and in a safeguarded, boundaried way, like having our interactions. Because when I look at this Hanged Man here, you know, so much of what it has been for you to operate in the darkness with the abilities that you have, with the energy, the essence that you are, with the ancient kind of quality that you have, is to feel very stuck and out of place and lonely in a world. There's an alienation here. And so that alienation is where a lot of manipulation can come in when we're looking to meet our needs in unhealthy ways. Yeah, we've got to really be very vigilant, because that's where it's almost like we can't really be attacked unless we're trying to form something to meet a need, instead of like be informed by like the answer to a mystery. Like there's something there that this energy wants us to be very mindful of, because this Hanged Man here is being like stuck or getting stuck in like certain dimensions, not really being able to move through them. Because the Empress, you know, so this energy is almost like, you know, like the Diagnosis is saying you're like a stuck Empress. You're like an Empress that's been sort of like held captive or feels captive. But what you're carrying is enough energy and enough resources and enough creativity that you can create forever without ceasing. Like this is this quality of like a fertile planet. And with the that Ace of Cups just kind of speaks about how much the divine does truly love you. But with the Six of Swords, like, I have to take a breath, because I just, you know, sometimes I see things and I just kind of like get kind of stopped short with this notion of, you know, feeling afraid to move, feeling kind of buried alive. And that coming from inadvertently giving your power away, or inadvertently being kind of talked into giving your power away. Because in the darkness, in the figuring it out, there was stuff that happened that wasn't so great. And you are moving away from that. You're moving away from a place of not really, you know, in the journey that you've been on, you're moving out of that place of unknowing and out of that place of blindness and into a place of, oh man, it's getting a little sticky. You're meant to move away and like grow and transform and not stay stuck with like certain concepts of love or concepts of what it means to need love or have love. And it's like you're holding on to this. Somehow there's a holding on, and there needs to be a taking action towards breaking free for the purpose of the message. And I gotta sit back and I gotta just give myself 1 second. So it's not all roses here. Like we are dealing with a little bit of criticism, you know, understanding that there's an ambush, understanding that you've been learning how to fight without sight. But also, you know, there's something to be said for being stuck, and even in your creative pursuits, feeling stuck. And that the love that you feel, the love that you have, and the love that you actually have to move away from. Why? What is that? This energy is saying it's like, you know, it's like you don't have to battle, you don't have to go through this blind on your own. And you're not. You have plenty of guidance. And so it's not like you don't have to go through this blind on your own and then you're like, well, where's the help? You know, this energy is kind of coming in to say, like, if you're sitting here, if you're listening, if the guidance is coming through, then you're getting guidance. You know, there is with Sofia, you know, this information around like boots on the ground and being the boots on the ground. At this point in time is the least fun ever. You know, being in the front lines of this process of transformation and transfiguration, like, is not fun at all, you know. And but that there's and there is, like, you know, something to be said for like a level of strain, but that the help is there. The help has never left you. The help is not going to leave you. The help isn't there to make it easy and breezy and beautiful, and that can be a frustration, and that can be an anger, and that can be an upset. The help is there to help you over this mountain of initiation where there's lions and tigers and bears and night and day and heat and blight and, you know, rivers that may or may not contain, like, you know, poison. Like, this is a part of what we're doing. And that's something, yeah, that's something that this energy is like, you know, you got to know that that's what's going on. Otherwise, you're just going to be cursing, you know, everything that comes your way that doesn't like provide a level of comfort. That doesn't mean that you can't have comfort, but what all of this discomfort is sort of pushing is you being able to access your magic in a way that like you can bring it into the world. Right, with the visionary. Let's see the card that's for the fall and the child eternal. Exorcist, I kind of felt that coming through. And so, you know, with the child eternal, and you know, what are these dimensions? Like each dimension represents like an area that you're meant to grow through and out of. And when something tries to keep you in an arrested kind of development, like keep you from having opportunities of growth, keep you from types of maturity, that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of this stuck position, is this notion of things that are trying to hold on to a former version of yourself and keep you the former version of yourself. And this energy is saying, and you've already transcended the former version of yourself, but the story that you're in is about a different version of yourself. And so there's this tension there where you are between two worlds, but that's not supposed to be something of strain and something of isolation and alienation and misery. That's something that is meant to, where you're meant to sort of not just be a permanent bridge, but but actually step into an experience of another world. Like, you know, the two worlds exist, you're this bridge, and this energy of Dionysus is saying, no, you're not. That's some pack horse nonsense that you've been talked into. You're not the bridge. You're able to straddle both worlds, but you are able to straddle both worlds because you're a creature of both worlds that in and of itself doesn't belong to either. And so when we think about what it means for you to envision what's not yet conceivable to others, and like that, and what that means, that's like being a trailblazer. It's like really, really difficult. But like what has you stuck right now is this fear of growing up. To a certain extent, there's a fear of growing up, partially because the experience of being a grown-up, and like from childhood, like up until you're now, like this notion of like, you know, I don't want to grow up because every adult that I look at is like miserable. And then being an adult and being like, being a grown-up sucks. It's horrible. This is the worst deal ever. That's part of like the false enchantment, because you are meant to sort of grow up and not be dependent, you know, like this notion of like in relationship to deities and the gods, that is there's a tricky thing here about, you know, simultaneously having reverence, but not going up to like that. There's something irreverent about going up to a deity or going up to a god and being like, mommy, take care of me and protect me, and I want to be comfortable, and I want to be wealthy, and I want to be happy, and everything's good. Now it's your turn. You do for me. I'm just here. Like, this is what I can do, is I'm going to put a bunch of offerings down, and like, now you're going to make my life perfect and wonderful. And this is the way that it is because I want demand to be like comfortable and wonderful. And that's not everybody, but that is a large portion of people who sort of like go to spirituality to fix everything, to have a parent, to return to a state of like not having to be responsible, not having to do the hard work of becoming. But to do the hard work of becoming is to go to a deity and say, okay, what's the lesson plan here? You know, I hope I'm prepared, and what do I need to be prepared? And like, you know, like as an adult, because, you know, you are meant to blaze a trail, and part of what it means to blaze that trail, part of what it means to bring a message, what it means to be a messiah, is to not kind of capsize as a result of the leadership that comes of it. You know, that aspect of growing up is also that aspect of being boundary, and it's also that aspect of saying no. It's also that aspect of knowing that to be a light in the darkness means that you're going to be surrounded by a lot of darkness. And so like there is this aspect of like exercising and removing like the destructive impulses that like have a stronghold in ways of being in the world that are, I'm not enough, I can't do it, this is like, I need, you know, it's not that you can't have help and you don't need help, but it's that at a certain point of initiation, after like the third or fourth tier, you're meant to be stepping into your divinity, which means you're going to be wielding power, and wielding power isn't about giving it away because like that person makes you uncomfortable, and you know what I mean? Like this way in which like we negotiate with power over power under based on our traumas and our wounds. Like this is this moment in time where like the stuff that you're attached to in the way of like, I don't want to be a grown-up, kind of like, you know, the parentified stuff, like that's very patriarchal, you know, and this is the hardest stuff to sort of let go of and move away from when we take spiritual responsibility for where we are in the journey. Ouch, right? It's kind of hard. That was kind of hard to hear. But with this Four of Coins is holding on, and this Knight of Wands, like it's holding you back because you have all of the strength, you know, to carry an inspiration. But when your focus is on denying that you've developed the ability to see in the dark or fight without, you know, fight with a blindfold, like there's something here. Let's get some more cards on that. Because that, again, we're speaking of this message, and what's holding you back from really being able to deliver that message has a lot to do with like a belief about being stuck because you don't have enough. It's not enough. You weren't given enough. There isn't enough. There, like, not enough, not enough, not enough. And that's both true and untrue at the same time. And so let's kind of look into it, because what you hold the energy of and what you carry with you and what you choose to share your life with energetically, if this is not freeing you of destructive impulses, and sometimes like the test is this is destructive, can you free yourself of it? And so like if you're not able to face your own demons essentially, and free yourself from those impulses, yeah, like that's kind of what we're dealing with in terms of sticky, difficult business, you know? What does it mean to really face that stuff when it's a belief that something is omnipotent when it isn't? It's a belief that something has power over you when it doesn't. And there can be some really convincing things in this world that make it really hard for us to say, wait a minute, I have the power to overcome this, you know, just energetically. Like, even if it's showing me a face that says, good luck, I'm going to be persistent, whether it's like a demanding boss or like a demanding experience, and it feels like you have no power in this and that you just have to succumb. You know, this is where we have this is belief-based, is what this energy is saying. This is belief-based because so much of what you can do is energetic if you weren't so afraid of wielding your magic. And there is a big aspect here with Neptune and the moon and chaos where you would have been conditioned out of like using magic really early in your like dabbling with it, you know, because like if the first thing that you do magically ends up blowing in your face really bad, then that's an assault on your magic, not something that says that you shouldn't do it, right? That doesn't mean that that a lot of people use magic really irresponsibly. They use it to wield their will in a certain kind of way, and that's messy, but that's the lesson. Then you get the lesson. You use your magic to wield your will in a certain kind of way, you will get it, and you will get a spanking, and it will be hard, and you will not make that mistake twice. People that can't seem to stop trying to become more powerful by contracting with everything that they can possibly, like, you know, perceive in order to try and gain some advantages, that's just a road straight to hell. But like most magicians will like notice like not to do that more than once, not to make that mistake more than once. And so, you know, the lesson, don't do that more than once, means you should have to do it once in order to learn not to do that more than once. So you value the lesson, you don't curse yourself for the mistake or the experience, but you don't make that mistake again. And you understand that every mistake in this, like especially in this group, like every mistake that you make is actually just like another chapter on the lesson board. And so like this is like a way to interact with some of this information and not feel stuck. Allow yourself to feel challenged, but also know that there's not a single challenge that is going to greet you that you don't have the power to overcome unless you start like listening to energies and forces that want to keep you like, well, you're stuck here, you can't overcome it. And so, you know, this energy says like, you know, to wield your strength and to wield your magic is something that you're being pushed to do and that you're being really like defensive about somehow. I don't know exactly what that means, but let's find out. So this is going to be like a long reading. It might be like a two-part, probably will be a two-part just because I don't even know where we were really just, we're at one section and we've got 3 more and we're at 44 minutes. So it might be a multi-part reading. So let's go into this next section here, which is, let me just see what, I want to just make sure that so there's actually a lot here around like built up tar. Yeah, I'm seeing tar with that resin. That like resin is like a substance that it's hard to remove because it's like you touch it and it's like sticky and you know what I mean? Like, and so there's this aspect of like, you know, what's holding you back at this point. It's not so much that like it's powerful. It's that it's kind of hard to remove because it's sort of sticky and it's like a tricky substance to work with. So you have the strength, you've had the breakthroughs, you know, in terms of the messaging, you hold the message. Like what we're trying to remove is like a sticky kind of a substance. And let's get into it. So, you know, sort of the first instruction is do not be angry at your life or the circumstances at your life that have produced the person that you are. Even if you look around and you're like, all of those horrible things, like really did like leave me in this like alone. And I don't know how I'm going to like, you know, make ends meet. Like there's this 5 of coins is about being abandoned and having needs that can't be met because of the neglect of those around you. So it's like a significant thing. And so Spirit says, like, you know, if you're angry at the world for producing these circumstances, think about the person that these circumstances produced and understand that to be angry at the circumstances that produced the person that you are is also to be angry at the person that you are. And then this energy is coming to say like, but no, like the person that you are is magnificent as a result. And the way that you've handled these trials and tribulations, the way that you've handled your suffering and the rebirth that is a result of that. You know, this is something of triumph, and it's also something that you very much came here to do. So when we look at this star card being about your elevation, your rising up, the phoenix rising, and that strength card being like all of that ambush, that all of that degradation actually is what Spirit is saying. Yeah, this energy of Dionysus is saying like all the degradation that you had to endure is in proportion to your rise. It's in proportion to your elevation. The strength that you had to develop, the muscle that you had to develop in order to overcome is in proportion to your rise again. And so he's showing me like, you know, like the death of, oh man, that's really a brutal imagery, but this notion of like, you know, the energy that is killed and has all of the limbs ripped away. And I think that's Dionysus' story. So much greater is the resurrection. You know, so it's almost like even when we worship the story of Jesus and like we think about the Passion of the Christ and all of the torture, you know, like it's almost like that torture is in proportion to like the power and the effect that resurrection then has. And so having a different relationship to circumstance, having a different relationship to the stories that you're a part of that either that you have the power to like initiate and pull meaning from. And I'm hearing like the stories that you are grafted to are stories that you're meant to sublimate. And like sublimation is not like domination. Sublimation is a little bit more like when you're looking through like a very limited perspective. Yeah, this came through a TikTok reading that I did not post, and I think I should probably post it. But so much of the same energy kept on coming through that I was like, I'm not posting this. And then I'm like, okay, what am I arguing with? You know, but like, so Spirit is kind of showing me that like, you know, that sublimation is being able to, like, if you're looking through a microscope and you're only able to see, this did come through a TikTok, I didn't post, so I'm going to post it. If you're looking through a microscope and you know, you can only, and you see all the bacteria and all of the parasites, and you're like, that's the picture that you've got. And that picture that you've got with all of the bacteria and all the parasites, you're like, you know, that's ugly. That's a, you know, that's a dog eat dog world. That's a world of cannibalism and misery. And I'm really disappointed that I'm here and I want off of this. I don't want to do this assignment anymore. Like I hate all of these little parasites. I want to get out of here. This world is ugly. I'm looking at the picture of it. Sublimation is when you look up from the microscope and you see the bigger picture, and suddenly that little picture of parasite is sublimated to a much bigger picture of the ecosystem and the nature of life itself. And so, you know, what you're being asked to do when it comes to your life stories and your life experiences is sublimate the parasites to a much bigger picture of meaning, and create a much bigger picture of meaning around what would have otherwise just been a gross picture in and of itself. So it's like the superpower or the spiritual technology is like taking that little story of the parasites in the viewfinder of the microscope, and then saying, hey, that's what we see, but like what's beyond it is even more. That like sublimates it into meaning that like erases its power over you. And so like this is what we're being told about magic and what it means to participate in magic. And in this energy, you know, Dionysus is the suffering god. It is, and I think that this is why Sofia is bringing this energy to us, or allowing us to sort of work with this energy, is because, you know, especially in terms of healing religious trauma, you know, and again, it's a story structure, it's a trope of the god that is suffering, the god that is half human, the god is that has to die in order to resurrect, and like what that process is, and what that process is for like, we've heard the story a million times. Story of Dionysus, we've heard it a million times in the story of Jesus. And so, you know, what does it mean to look at our suffering in light of a greater meaning is something that we were taught very early on. And that's a technology of faith that we're meant to use and we're meant to wield. Because if we don't do that, we become full of despair and we give up, and there's no fight in us. And so this energy is saying, like, you know, I do understand and I do like care, and I want you to know that like through that process of growth, you are so valued in this experience, and that experience is so valuable. It's not like, you know, it's not like suck it up, you know, it's for the greater meaning. It's more than that. It's a gift, but the suffering has gifts like inherent in it, and that there's something powerful that can be built of that space. And you're called to believe it, and you're called to sort of like enter into that. The moon, though, like, you know, this is interesting because it's like there's so much that you don't see. There's so much that you don't see that's happening in the background, that's happening behind the scenes. And so part of what it means to enter into this mystery and to enter into this divine co-creation is to know that you are a part of something much bigger, that you aren't able to really see like how it all works together and what it all is. And this is interesting. I'm being told to look at this. So you see how this figure here, she is in the... for lack of the better words, she's in the sewer system. I need better lighting. I really want you to be able to see this card. It's just so dark. I don't know if you can see what I'm looking at, but she's got she's got a crocodile, and she's got what looks like a wolf, and they both look rabid, and she is at perfect peace. And even though she's connected to them, it's almost like she's taming them. There's something about her energy that is taming these two energies. And so you don't really know, like when you're in the sewer system, like taming these energies around you, you don't understand the role that plays in building the greater cathedral. You know, and building like the resurrection, that you don't understand your part in it. And if this energy like could see only the crocodile or the wolf and not her place in taming these energies so that the resurrection can happen as it should. And the resurrection is your resurrection, but it's also the resurrection of others. To be able to sort of like value what it means to be in this position. I mean, that can be really tough and really difficult when we come into a world that says like, the only thing that you're supposed to value is like your success and you're thriving and you're amazing. But like from a spiritual point of view, if your success and you're amazing and you're thriving in a system of oppression, then you're not working for the team that's trying to dismantle that system. So there's something to be said for, you know, being put in this position like of the system doesn't work for you because you're not a part of holding it up. You're a part of dismantling it. If it worked for you, there would be no dismantling that system. And so you have to kind of wade in the waters between being in a system that's not going to work for you but also being here for the process of what it means to dismantle that system, both within you and as a result of doing it within you, the effect it has, you know, without. But it does require certain meaning making and communication that is sort of work. With this Prince of Swords here, this is action that needs to be taken, that is being taken, but like, that you feel beat down, that you feel tired, that the strain is overwhelming, has a lot to do with just looking through the viewfinder at that picture of parasites and being like, ugly, miserable, no good world. Get me off this rock. I don't like what I'm seeing. And what we're being called into is to pick your head up. Because what you're seeing is a fraction of what there is. And your part in it is not to just be the identifying how ugly it is. Your part in it is to be able to identify that the viewfinder is the viewfinder in the first place. That's the magic right there. And with that Sun card here, and then like holding that power, wielding that power. And this is right here, these two cards, that this is Phoenix Rise. So there is a TikTok that I'm going to have to post whether I like it or not, with the moon here again. Now, we've had the moon come out 3 different times. So we're looking at something that, you know, we're operating in the dark. We can't really tell whether or not what we're seeing is, yeah, so it's like, you know, operating in the dream space, operating in the dark, not really being able to tell, is it an illusion? Is it a delusion? Is it true? Is this my friend? Is this not my friend? Is this my path? Is this not my path? And so bringing the sun into like an arena cloaked in darkness means first knowing how to operate in that darkness, and knowing how to operate in that darkness is what you spend the most of your life doing. And in that place, you're developing discernment. In that place, you're learning how to fight with a blindfold on. And that means that all of the other senses are getting developed. It's really difficult. But with the ash here and the sun, this is the Phoenix rising. And as the Phoenix, and as the Phoenix that has risen, and you are the Phoenix that is rising. You're not really the Phoenix that is risen. You are the Phoenix that is rising. And I see you as being at that point in like the rise where, it's like you're looking at the ashes. You're looking at the ashes, like you're Phoenix, you're the Phoenix has begun to rise, and you're looking at the ashes, and you're like stuck on the injustice of the ashes. So the version of yourself that you no longer are, that form that you were, like think about the version of yourself that you no longer are as an old form, an old container that held the person that you are. That old container, that old form, and everything that was clinging to it, that old form is ashes. That old form has no form. There's nothing to hold on to. There's nothing to cling to. So the only thing that energies that want to hold you down can keep you to is to try and convince you that you still hold that form, that you still are that way, that those are your limitations, and that is the person that you are. And those energies can come from anywhere. It can come from within even. And so, you know, the important thing here is to notice that those energies cannot hold on to you, because the form that they're trying to hold you to no longer exists. You cannot revert to a former form. The war is over. The wrestling match that continues is a wrestling match that is about the injustice of the suffering that the form that you used to be experienced. So you're not holding on to the form that you used to be, but you are holding on to the injustices that happened to that form that caused it to become ashes. And by holding on to that injustice, this is kind of this letting go that you're being asked to do. Because the injustice that, you know, happened to the former version of yourself that is no longer any form, because it is now all ashes, that injustice needs to be released in order to value the fact that you're a new form. You've become something new. You are rising. You are the Phoenix that is rising. And to embrace that form means to let go of the, like, and I see that helicopter flying again, like I see this a lot. You know, it's like the helicopter, like the injustice itself puts you in a position where you're like a helicopter looking for a place to land. And until you find justice, there's nowhere to put your feet down. There's nowhere to land. But basically what Dionysus is coming in and saying, what Sophia is coming in and saying is to fixate on the injustice is to fixate on the ashes that hold the form that you no longer are, which gives an in-way to those energies that used to influence and affect and manipulate that form, but can't manipulate anything other than like your sense of justice. And so like part of what it means to rise, like to allow that phoenix, that you're in the phoenix rise, and to really allow yourself to resurrect, to really allow yourself to rise, is to know that no one can access that form. And the injustice that happened to the version of yourself that is no longer was part of the alchemy that created the version of yourself that you are. And that if we really want justice, this energy is like, if you really want justice, then learn how to use the magic of story and take the meaning out of the injustice and then present that meaning alongside the injustice, and therefore close the book on it. Disempower the injustice by revealing the meaning that you found encountering it, and change the weight of it and the power of it into that which has no weight and has no power, and only holds the value of the revelation that you brought forth through finding meaning. And so, you know, when we look at this as an interactive process, this is something that we do like very actively. And so let's keep it moving. And so, you know, even though you are in this place right now where there is a lot of confusion, there is a lot that you can't see. We keep on getting that moon card that indicates there is a lot of this. Do I trust? Do I not trust? Is this right? Is this wrong? Does this make sense? Does this not make sense? And that's sort of, you know, when we think about the abundance that can be found in this transformation. First of all, it's in sharing. It's in community. Let's get some more cards. It's very funny, you know, working with Sophia feels a certain way, and working with Dionysus feels a certain way. And to be sort of like almost kind of like the energy of both is so different, like so interesting. Like wild, actually, trying to like talk about like different energies hanging out in the same space, like an alchemy and how that works. But Sophia contains like so much, you know. It's not she's okay. The offer, the conceptualization, yeah, and all of the interference. So when we think about what's keeping you from making meaning, because as people, as a collective, where so many of you channel, as a collective where so many of you are messiahs, are carrying a message, like this is the collective that we're in. What is it that's stopping you? I want to look at this very closely, because the abundance is in sharing, and the transformation is in sharing also. And it's a major transformation. We're talking resurrection, life, and like, you know, death to life. We're talking seeing someone be baptized, born again. All right, let me think about this, because I just have to like sit back for a second and begin to steady myself as I approach this territory, because I'm not sure what I'm going to see, and I get a little bit nervous every once in a while, and I'm having one of those moments. So I'm going to have some water. We are doing okay on time. So this energy is saying that, like, yes, there's interference. Yes, absolutely there's interference. Yes, there's influence that you don't want. But this is part of like sharpening the discernment, and also like sharpening what you're manifesting, because so much of like getting, like, you know, one of the worst things that can happen sometimes is like getting what we ask for. I don't know what that means, but I'll find out in a second. I'm almost getting the advice to go slower think we're going to break this up. Into 2 readings. The Tower at the bottom of the deck. So we've got the competition. The 5 of Wands is the competition, and the King of Coins is about power and dominion over this earth, you know, essentially. And the Magician is kind of like what we're talking about in terms of like the development of your magic and the freeing of your magic as well. And the Tower is like a tower falling on this interference. So I'm gonna leave this here for a moment just because I can feel that I need a break, and I can feel that I want to be really clear about like how I proceed with this. So you won't notice the break, but I will, because I'm gonna like post this probably connected, so it's not gonna really be in 2 parts for you, but I'm just gonna take a breather and I will be right back. Okay, so now I've been like a day and a half away from this reading, and I put all sorts of stones on here to kind of keep it in place. And a lot has transpired. Like, I've seen and learned a lot from, like, I have almost no sense of where the first portion of this reading left off. But I'm so excited about what we're going to be looking at right now, because we're at this point with Sofia with like breakthrough material, especially in terms of like the direction that this took. So I thought it was very weird that like Dionysus kind of came into, and I'm feeling the pull to have cards in my hand. You know, I thought it was like weird that Dionysus came through, but I was like, okay, so, you know, if Sofia is allowing it, that there's a purpose, there's something to this. And especially because what she was teaching me, and I don't know if we even got into this, I kind of hope so, you know, what she was teaching me about, you know, it's the story structure that contains the truth of the divinity. So that the ancients, when they understood art, because art, like how art developed organically was spiritual, like in and of it, like thinking about like evolution, like the spiritual evolution of like humanity was that like spiritual work was artwork, you know, taking inspiration and making it into a tool was a spiritual experience. And the development of like, you know, the written word was a spiritual experience, like symbols that magically translate meaning. And if you put the symbols together, the voice of the one person can be in your mind, and then you can travel with it. I mean, this was how this all developed. And so when she was explaining to me about what it meant to encounter divinity and what the ancients really understood about a relationship with the divine and how the divine manifested in nature and mirrored from like the unseen to the seen, like what they were able to access, and the spiritual technologies that were developed across, I want to say across platforms, but across the world in different ways. But essentially the conveying of the information was divinity onto humanity. And the way that this worked is it worked through story structure. So to take a story as literal was to pervert what the tool that was at play in terms of what the magic was. So, you know, the ancients would take a story, like a mythology, and part of their initiation was to like as if the story structure were a cave, to go into that cave, take on the perspective of that, like, of the character that you're taking on the perspective of in the story, and then the truth and the divinity of the experience of that character is then transferred onto you as you move through the story and arise with like a catharsis and a new birth, right? And so Dionysus showing up like was weird until I understood, because of some shape shifting started to happen, and I kind of was able to see what Sofia was teaching me about story, then therefore like through mythology, right? And especially with the Gnostic stuff, and like when you look at the history of how the different myths come together, like this starts to make a lot of sense. And so this is where we're entering, and I'm so excited about this because it's really cool. And so you know, we're starting with these cards because that's where we left off with, and we're talking about I think we're almost talking about the nature of consciousness writ large, which is, it's a cool breakthrough that we're seeing with this reading. It's going to be a long one, but I think it's worth it. I really do. So what I want to kind of, I want to start by saying that like learning this stuff is so cool. It's almost like a reverse engineering of like all things to a certain extent, because I channel deities all the time, and I kind of understand that they're not what we're taught. You know, like a lot of what we're taught about divinity is this all perfect, all beautiful, create every little hair on your head a perfect count. You know, like has a big pool, ocean, lake of all of the tears that you like cried, like knows every tear that has fallen. That's not really how it works. Like, you know, it's not to say that you aren't loved, that you aren't cherished, that you aren't valued, but it's a lot more like the relationship between, like, you know, I want to say like mentor and mentee, but also like parent to child is like very apt, because even though a parent has unconditional love for their child, it's the parent-child relationship is really like about like the two characters in the interplay and the learning that happens between them, and there's not a perfection to this, and so there is a weariness. And so when a god like Dionysus comes through, like, I'm going to hold back, I'm gonna sit back, I'm not gonna like join into like this is gonna be something where I'm very careful, I'm aware of Sophia's presence, because Dionysus is also the god of madness. And so as somebody who has a kind of like perceptual, philosophical synesthesia and like a lot of spiritual gifts that put me in a position where I'm never really seeing the world like everyone else is. Like I wake up in the morning and very carefully and like with great intention, like plant my feet in the ground. Like my chart has no earth in it. So like I have to like be very careful with like a god that, you know, is about delirium and like just ecstatic states and insanity, right? You know, I want to be really careful with this. But the value of working with a god that is teaching through those mediums of like story and mythology and understanding, when you work with a deity, they're gonna position you in stories within your life and ask you to make meaning of those stories within your life, and that's going to be your lesson. That's going to be the curriculum right there. And so it's a lot to step into an agreement to learn from a deity that is as wild as Dionysus is. So I was very careful about this and like kind of like really, you know, like really, but I was willing to do it. But I stopped. When I stopped, I kind of felt a little bit nervous about like the people I'm teaching. Like, you know, I don't love the idea of having you feel like as comfortable. I don't want people who have more enthusiasm and less experience to feel comfortable like jumping into working with a deity that might take them to extremes that maybe they didn't, you know, that might not be the best learning process. And so I'm careful with this. And I always encourage you when working with deities to not just have the assumption that there's a perfected God with a count of all of your tears who's going to make sure nothing uncomfortable ever happens to you, because some of them work in extremes, like to such a degree, you know, they just do. You know, we have the Destroyer, the Medallion, and the Venom, and yeah, so this is important. Because we have also the River. So some of the territory that we're entering is just a little bit challenging. You know, I want to say that what Sofia has shown me about the structure, the spiritual structure that we currently exist in is one of like, so serious exploitation. And whenever like there's a moment of like, well, we don't want to like, you know, promote fear, we don't want to be panicky, we don't want to like see doom and gloom. The reality of the situation is we don't need to go into a supernatural venue to find an example of how the structure that we exist in is therefore exploitation. There's a cannibalism of psychosocial resources, you know, for the purpose of like there's, you know, for the purpose of an ends that justify the means that aren't yours. And so like we don't have to take like huge leaps to know that we're in a system of exploitation. And so when as spiritual practitioners that like enter into the mysteries, like one of the things that we acknowledge is that we're in a mirror world in a sense. And again, we can apply philosophy, you know, and we don't need to get too spiritual to see this. But what we're looking at here is competition for dominion over the earth, and very particularly your magic. And the tower moment and the interference is about this transparency that's coming through that actually like shakes the foundation of an established structure of world domination. And that's change. That's like changing a worldview. But that's actually like the moment that we're in. And when we're looking around and we're looking at all of the ways in which people are confirmation bias initiating these horrible prophecies and actually working their way towards like an end of the world, as somebody who is a prophet myself, like, and I'm not, I'm not prophet myself, like high atop a hill. I'm talking about the gift of prophecy, which, that's what it's called in Christian circles, but it's also like being psychic. It's being a seer. And I can tell you that, like, of course, the Roman Empire that became the empire of Christendom, with its conquering spirit of supremacy, because this is the God that they serve, right? And the God that they serve is reigning on the platform of supremacy, hierarchy, monotheism works in that vein unnecessarily. And the end of empire, the end of that story structure, the end of that structure over our life, the end of that worldview. Now, listen to the way that I say that, how Sophia has translated what gods and goddesses are, what deities are. They exist as the story structure, not the story itself, and you move through it and you move through them and their wisdom. And so the story structure that we're in about this type of domination over power under in this way of exploitation, supremacy is its God, and supremacy is what people are serving when they serve status in any way, shape, or form. All that to say is that God and the wisdom of like the ages tells us that when a worldview dies, that's the dying of a God, and there is a fight, and we're in this place of spiritual warfare in this way. And you can make it secular or you can make it spiritual, but it's actually the same both. Exactly. So this is what we're looking at. And so what Sophia is trying to teach us is she's going to bring us into a remembrance of self, but she's also going to challenge us to look very like bold-faced without flinching at the way in which our energy is harvested, our creative capital, our creative capacity is harvested, the way our lives are being harvested, and what is the impetus behind like all of that stuff. I'm losing the channel a little bit, so I need to come back to the cards because let me just try and like center myself. Yeah. But there's competition over your attention. And when we're asked to, so diagnosis is coming in as like this energy of chaos and this energy of uncertainty and moving through chaos. And so when you have to move through chaos, this is the energy that's useful, because we are entering into a time when it's not going to be clear what is true and what is false. When the veil is thinning in such a way as like everyone's beliefs are doing things and people are seeing things and these are contradicting, all those contradictions are causing arguments and wars, and people are willing to die on all of these different hills because of the spiritual experiences that they have. Like when we're having this kind of like shift and we're like moving through dimensions in this way, or moving through this understanding, the first thing that you need to know is that what you see in front of you is not necessarily it. Like, how can I explain this better? This is so hard to bring through, and I feel like I should be moving with cards, but I'm being cautioned to just like slow down and be calm with it and have some faith in like that this is going to land okay. Where we give our power to, where we lend our imaginative power and our belief is everything. Proof that belief has an incredible power that we're talked out of is the placebo, and I'll say it every single time I'm in a conversation with anyone. If the placebo pill is the container for someone's belief and faith, and that faith then transforms. Like if we see these faith healing episodes and they're not religion and specific, it's a type of belief that has a type of effect that creates a healing. Like this is a capacity that we have as humans, and we've been testing it forever. So our belief builds the world that we're in. When we remove that belief and when we see things from a different vantage point, that's the whole ball field. And so like I'm saying that to say like this is the power that you hold. You hold the power to influence like reality with your imagination. And I know that this is like seeming sort of like it's dense coming through because we're talked out of this really, really young. Why do we lose our imaginative capacity at like 6 years old? Like where does our ability to like be in like wild imaginative creative states, like why is that siphoned off and then channeled into like believing in a reality that exists in a certain way that conforms to like you like growing up and also like giving up like essentially over time. So what it means to come back into the power of what we have is also to understand that these story structures are extorting our belief and then made manifest, given form, given power. So this competition over the dominion over this earth is all about our magic that we hold individually by way of the power of our own belief and what we do with that belief. And that sounds like vague and yeah, nice and everything like that. But what Sofia has shown me is like, no, you don't understand the power that you're holding. Like you really don't understand what you're able to do with this. And you really don't even understand that your power over the unseen world in terms of being material makers and like how desperately they want to hijack that for their own purposes and for their own creative like thirst. And so when we think about the way that the world is changing, like you are always hosting energies. That's what it is to like eat food and have like, you know, like to have coffee, and that coffee like perks you up. You're hosting the energy that is like housed in that plant's essence. When you have like drug addiction is a really good example of these are energies that you're bringing into your body to like host and to hold and to take part in experiencing life through and with. And the same way we do this with food and drugs and all forms of like nature, like what it is to exist, is also to understand that there's an energetic thing happening spiritually where what we hold and what we host is what has the power to use our creative potential in whatever way we are giving it permission to. And a lot of this is we're tricked out of it. A lot of it is a structure that is like absolutely designed to turn us into these machines for something else's purposes. And so like as above, so below, we don't need to get too spiritual with this. We see it in reality. And so that's kind of the web. You know, we come into the world with this incredible bundle of power, and the web that we're birthed into, there's all sorts of things that are designed to trap and harness our energy and manipulate it for a purpose other than our own expansion and our own development and our own growth in relationship to the divinity that provides for everything in nature, but somehow not us. Except that it does provide for us, but we are making that distortion real. And so that's not like victim blaming, because there are spirits that are heavily invested that like see your potential at birth. They know your soul imprint. They can see what they're working with, and there is a absolute web that is cast around harnessing that energy, controlling that energy for its end. And now this grip is falling, but this is the energy of like poison and the destroyer. And so like, you know, Sofia is letting a lot, like, you know, when diagnosis comes in and then shape shifts into Jesus, which is what happened to me when I started to see what she was showing me. She was showing me something, and these are energies that are involved in our evolution and in our enlightenment. And, you know, and this is why we have to be so careful about being like, that's evil and that's good, because what I'm learning with diagnosis is that everything that we understand to be you know, of value, almost like everything is kind of a counterfeit of the real thing. And in the same way that like real like divine love is what we're hungry and what we're looking for, and like the romantic sort of package of like siphoning limerence is what we're taught as life. So there's a counterfeit for everything real. And so as we come into like the reality of things, there is like a having to let go of all the counterfeit, and that's letting go of all kinds of programming and stepping into true power, which is a true understanding, and actually being able to hold like the realness. That's a growth span thing. But like what Sofia has been showing me, and what diagnosis has come in to show me, is our concept of duality as we know it is a counterfeit of what actual duality looks like and how it actually behaves. And so he's bringing in this notion of we're going to have to get out of like this dominion, control, deterministic sort of way of looking at truth. Because the truth is about to be a shapeshifter in ways that we can't even conceive of. We've got AI doing all kinds of stuff, intellectual property, creative property, you know, community, and the way that information spreads. Like we're moving into kind of a hive mind sort of a place. And when you sort of step into the unconscious mind, you step into a dream space. And so like unity consciousness is also it's a coherence around the unconscious mind to a certain degree, you know, in a way. So we have that's kind of the frontier that we're looking at with consciousness, and we're about to expand into it. And like one of the first things we have to understand about a dream space is a dream space is symbolic. And once we understand that the dream space is symbolic and that the dream space speaks in archetypes, once we get that, once we really get that, then we can understand that's the language of gods. That's the language of divinity. Is not our English, and it is not our language. They speak in symbols and synchronicities and all sorts of things. Like nature and the cosmos has a way of communicating with us that isn't our straightforward communication the way that we do it, which is why it's story structure that houses the meaning that we transform through and with. That's the experience of divinity, and not the story itself. And so when we're being assaulted by this is the truth and that's the truth and this is what's happening and this is what's happening, we have to really be able to stand back and say like, well, you know, this is a process that I have to participate in a certain kind of way for a certain kind of outcome that has to do with intuition in my body. So I know that's a lot, and I haven't even really touched the cards, but this is the information that I've been learning because, you know, Dionysus was shape-shifting on me, and I was like, why are you being like this? Like, this is why I don't like to work with energies like you. I'm not going to enter into like a charades game with you. Like, I can identify your energy and the fact that you keep on moving, like, and that you're showing me all these ways in which you like have been of influence and like what it means, and that you're my teacher, like. And then I'm stepping back and I'm working with Sofia, and I have an enormous group of divine feminine energies with me. One in particular that stepped forward is Hypatia. And so like we have what could be like, you know, it's an incredible resource, you know what I mean? And like whether or not you believe that this is what I'm experiencing or not, this is what I'm experiencing, and it doesn't matter. That's the truth, because the wisdom that comes through, the story around it is irrelevant. And that's the thing that's most important that we learn here with Sofia, is that the wisdom is what you're learning to identify. That's the gnosis, and that's a knowing in the body. And that's what we're going to need to really work with, because we're going to encounter powers and principalities in a way that's desperate, that it hasn't had to be before. And so let's get into it. I'm going to have a little bit more water. I'm sorry that was like the longest preamble. We're 20 minutes in, but I hope that everything came through the way that I've been learning it. Because holy macaroni, you know, the first thing that we have to understand is that like the shape shifting is instructive. It's not to fear, and it's bringing us into the nature of how magic operates, and like finding our center of gravity is part of like your initiatory process that, you know, where you find your inner authority, and until you find that inner authority, you have to learn to, you know, like that, you know, that's part of what it is. And so when we think about this competition that's going on, you know, community, divine feminine energy, you know, is community. And so like when we think about like, you know, the community that exists on TikTok of like genuine, authentic, and that's what we are seeing. That's why it's so valuable. That authenticity is what's attractive. The counterfeit is like fame or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like we have to always say that the counterfeit is giving you a clue of what we're looking for. We're looking for a window into other people's stories, but we want actually to encounter each other. And so like as community rises, as we see more of ourselves in each other and less alienation, as we're more coherent in like what it is that we are and how we want to develop, and like the equality and all of that, the more we grow in like unity consciousness in that way, this transformation and this disempowering of the structure that exploits us, that's how we grow. And so, you know, there's a competition for your attention. Is your attention on something that is like about humanity? And that doesn't mean like you can't play and have fun. You have to use your imagination, and you have to play. And when we enter into the realm of what it means to use your magic and have your magic like water to wine and actually do the thing, you know, we're talking about entering into like recapturing play and imagination as something that was supposed to eventually develop into our capacity for creative magic. And so this competition over your creative capacity, this competition over your imagination, that's a very important key thing right there. And your energy, and where you are, and where is it going, and for what purpose, and is it being diverted into emptiness, or is it into a learning process? It's not, when we talk about duality, it's not like, are you right or are you wrong? It's, am I learning from this? Am I trying to figure it out? Am I seeking? Am I in some process of evolution, or have I given up and I'm rotting? Because those are really like one is like where there's like decomposition begins on a spiritual level, and one is where you're like becoming immune, and so and then leveling up. And so like that's what we're looking at here in terms of like the competition over your attention and your energy and your creative capacity and what you do with it, and your motivation. Like, you know, it starts when you're little. You know, the minute you come onto this, you know, planet, there's a lot of interference there. And so let's just look at this a little bit closer. Because that Tower moment is talking about this is crumbling. And so what does it mean to step into real power instead of counterfeit power? Counterfeit power being control, real power being anointing. Victim student. Oh, interesting. This is some stuff. And beggar. Oh my goodness. So, you know, stepping out of status, divesting from power structures that operate on the axis of requiring exploitation. But one of the first things that we have to look at is we kind of have to see where, you know, so as Dionysus, oh my gosh, this is really interesting stuff, was kind of shape-shifting, and I was kind of like hanging back and being like, you know, and I'm with the presence of Sophia, so I know that I'm supposed to figure out what's going on. I'm supposed to like work through it. And this is not an oppositional energy. It's actually a fun energy that you want to hang out with, you want to like be with. And it is cool lessons, but he was shape-shifting, and he was able to sort of affect the way that I felt with each shape too. And he was able to show me that like, there is like a harvesting and manipulating of energy going on when we are presented with a situation where the stories that we're told are like instructive in a way that is about division and is about like feeding into this notion of let me get this right, because something just happened and it kind of threw me. Injustice is a part of this trap. You know, keeping us in a defensive position is one of the main strategies, and that's kind of where we're fighting this notion of the purpose isn't survival. The purpose is surviving survival, because you're constantly surviving. You never quit surviving. You're tasked with surviving from the first moment that you can begin to sort of like comply. Why do we comply? Why do we come into compliance? Why do we stop playing? Why do we step out of the imaginative process and step into a structured environment that like slowly extorts, you know, our sense of our limit, like our potential. Yeah, extorts our sense of our potential is what she's showing me. You know, why do we agree to take paths that like are just for survival to the exclusion of everything else? And I want us to just sit with that question for just a minute. Because of injustice, the presence of injustice, the threat of injustice, and it's almost a gun to your head that says you're either going to like learn how to ace this test and like win this game, or you're going to be one of the multitudes that are you know, fall into the category of like failed and suffers. And so like this notion of like, this shadow attribute of student here, arrogance in pursuit of destructive knowledge, unwillingness to translate knowledge into action. When you have a gun to your head and everything that you take in has to produce something for a system that is standing between you being able to support yourself and you having to support the system itself. Like it's a very, you know, it's a diverting of your energy. And like, we know that this is like, it seems like impossible for us to extract ourselves from this without becoming victims. There's a problem here with personal boundaries that seems almost insurmountable. So, you know, when we think about this like community under this oppression and at odds with each other in terms of positioning and survival, this is a system of competition instead of a system of cooperation. And so for us to move into a system of cooperation, we have to be able to like leap of faith our way out of comparison. And we don't have to do that all at once. What I'm being shown is that we move out of comparison slowly, because it's so ingrained that you have to compare to compete, and you have to compete to survive. This is the formula that's holding us all captive. To divest from that is to divest from comparison. That's a minute by minute, hour by hour process. That's undoing so much conditioning, and it's undoing conditioning around positioning that like puts us as helpless victims, and takes our focus from learning from like divinity stories in a way that would like most benefit our true purpose, or our true experience, and makes us students of avoiding being victims at all costs, at all times. And so when we move into, so what has dominion over the world, or what has dominion over you? Students of like your whole focus being around whatever it takes to not be a victim of like circumstance, of life, of sickness, of, financial ruin, of social degradation. Like this is the operating system. So to divest from a system of comparison is to absolutely disqualify that operating system. And that is really difficult. Especially because there's this notion of this, the bottom of the deck energy is dependence on others to the exclusion of effort. We're going to be dependent on each other no matter what we do, whether that dependence on each other is, one of cooperation, or that dependence on each other is you are dependent on those around you to help you position yourself in terms of survival. In comparison and competition. Like competition is still like a system where we're interacting, like competition relies on an interaction, and so does cooperation. And so like how are you supposed to like be on the playing field with the rules of cooperation when everybody's playing the game of competition? Like this is what we're talking about in terms of this is difficult stuff, but how we do it is we divest from comparison, and we think about the interference, and we also think about what we are as conscious beings, and as spiritual magicians, as alchemists, we think about, because this is really like, this is the magician, this is what does it mean to now, we divest from comparison, we're investing in cooperation, but there's a lot of crap that goes on, in terms of being able to offer the world anything in terms of this whole mess. It's a mess, and so when we think about you being established and you being able to establish yourself and being able to like have a platform where your survival is no longer the primary threat, it's all of our survival too. It's not just you, it is a unity consciousness kind of survival. And so for you to create and be able to be like to use what is yours and not what is being manipulated of yours, and you use it. First of all, we're babies in this. We don't even know how to use our magic. We don't really know how to use this muscle. We see that the evidence of miracles, but we don't actually know like how that's not a fluke. It's not a fluke. And there are those born with like a preponderance, of giftedness in this way, and where others have different types of giftedness. There's something to be said for that. But in terms of the energy that are harvesting your creative potential, that's where you look at the fruit of the spirit, which is, this is a Christian term, but it's a good one. The fruit of the spirit. What is the fruit? And most of us are barely producing fruit. And to the extent that we are, it's a laborious, like difficult effort. Many of us are in such, deprivation. And that's where we want to disable this interference, is around this concept of deprivation. And establish ourselves. How do we establish ourselves when we're in the midst of experiences of deprivation, and when we feel our survival is threatened? That's really going to be what this Prince of Swords, taking action on your own ascension with this star, and like really what you're worth. So I want to start there, because we've kind of established all of what's going on here, in order to say, okay, how do we use our magic, and what does it mean to take action on our own ascension? And we're going to talk a little bit about ascension. And I know that there's like, I just want to like point out that like the tower is falling on this interference. Like we are beginning to see clearly, but part of what it means to begin to see clearly is to actually be able to understand like its story structure. It's the truth within the fiction that is often like what's of value, and the fiction is irrelevant, and there's a sorting process that you're meant to begin to engage in, and there's a lot going on with what I just said. But as I move these cards out of the way, like I do want to say that like this choice related to like our life force, essentially, is like kind of what we're looking at with this process. So I'm going to shuffle these cards all back in because, you know, part like stepping into the flow of anointing is going to be the key. So that Tower is falling, the end is nigh. And so when you think of this notion of like those that are co-creating the end of the world, it was obvious that unity consciousness was always going to be the end of the empire. And so this was prophesied because this was true. And the empire, having sibyls and having high priests, like having their oracles, you know, in addition to John, I think it's John on the mountain, you know, the book of Revelations, which book of Revelations is actually a coded letter, but it doesn't matter. It's the story and not the structure, you know what I mean? And like what the story has to offer when you move through it is like the divination therein, like that's it. And so the Bible is a divination tool. Like, let's just call it what it is. So when, you know, yeah, when you derive the meaning out of scripture, like there's a whole thing with that, and all scripture is valuable in this way. And so no one was like wrong that monotheistic literalist belief systems that built the empire, that built hierarchy, that is that system, it was going to come to a head. And the two dominant monotheistic, like this story was always going to play out, that this type of belief system and this type of story structure only leads to war. It only leads to violence, and it only leads to like two superpowers fighting. No matter how you look at it, it's always going to be the fight of the this is the true God versus that is the true God, with this system of thinking and the system of organization. And so we are going to go through tribulation, of course. And of course, they're putting magic into making that happen in a certain particular kind of way, which is what our magic is naturally able to do. What they're able to do, you know, coming into this place of coherence and then moving and making that, making manifest that which is collectively imagined. That's magic right there. And that's really powerful magic. And that's empire magic. And when we step into our creative capacity and our magic, it's a different development process, but like you're seeing, I know that you're kind of like seeing it. So, you know, what does it mean to actually be able to sort of use our magic so that the only magic on earth isn't this horrendous evil magic, you know, related to the empire having its last gasps, because that's what it's doing. It's already over. But we want to step into the bounty, and we want to step into the bounty sooner and not later. Because unity consciousness is a kind of a kingdom of heaven on earth in its own way. Because, you know, if we were all on the same page that humanity deserved to like thrive, each and every one of us, then that's what we're looking for, you know, and the growth that comes from that and the evolution that comes from that. It's a choice. I mean, it's definitely a choice. And it's a choice that we step into in a situation where this seems like we're blocked. This seems like a prison yard. Let's take a look at this. Okay. Oh, I love it. So, you know, I love working with the deity plane, and I love working with deities, and there is something to be, you know, it's so funny because I had a dream about this reading, and it bothered me, the dream that I had about this reading. I'm putting these cards away because we're going to just look at these. The dream that I had about this reading was that it was one of those like naked on stage kind of dreams, and I was doing the reading, and then I had a dream about the reading, and in the dream I like was naked, like on the cards basically, and it freaked me out so bad because nobody likes, that's horrible. No one wants to, just, that was weird, right? That's an uncomfortable dream. So I realized that like I'm gonna talk a little bit, I'm gonna expose myself a little bit with this reading, because you know, I've been working with Sofia, and working with Sofia, she's like the hardest professor. And not that she's a professor, but like when you work with deities, like again, they all have their own language, they all have their own style, and no, they don't like love every little hair on your head. Like that's not it. That's love bombing in a way that, you know, I mean, they can love you, especially if you're a devotee, but what's been coming through my experience lately, in ways that you know, I've been trying to look at and see through and understand. And, you know, it's so much of what Sofia does is be like, get in your body, you know, like sit in your chair. She's always like, get in your body, because I'm always moving into my mind to try and figure things out. And working with divine feminine aspect of God, that feminine, divine feminine energy is like, really, you have to be in your body in order for that intuition to be working the way it's meant to. Don't be talked out of your body. Your intuition lives there in a certain kind of sense. The body belongs to the earth. The body belongs to the mother. The body belongs to nature, and the body communicates, and that's where nature communicates her secrets. And so we have to be embodied. It's really important for your discernment. It's really important, you know, because of the interference and the way that consciousness works. The way that consciousness works is like a fish swims in water, and then you go up to the fish and you say, fish, you're swimming in water. And the fish says, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, we're swimming it through consciousness, and that consciousness is a shared experience, which is why, like, understanding that when we're moving from like one worldview to another, and like when there's this breakthrough around consciousness and like this dimensional shift, you can't take the logic that we impose on like the world in front of us and try to impose that on symbolic, archetypal language. So with this competition that we're looking at here, the competition is for your magic. Your magic, you're capable of far more than you realize. And a lot of this starts like in the imagination. So when Dionysus was shape-shifting, and I was looking at Dionysus, and I saw Dionysus form into Jesus, and then form into Mary Magdalene, and then, you know, and I know Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and I understand and I know their energies really, really well. And so like it was very interesting to, it wasn't trickery. It was almost like this energy of Dionysus was saying, you have to learn how to see in the dark. You have to learn how to see with your other senses. You want to move through these stories without losing your mind. Like, so how do you move through these stories that are being told without losing your mind? You know, that's part of what it is to work with him, is to sort of understand that this is the suffering God, and this is the God that resurrects. And that's going to be a very tricky learning curve right there. But like ultimately, like I'm working with these other high priestess energies, and Hypatia has been like, I want to channel her. I want her to let me channel her, like in the worst way. And she's been very careful about that. And she's really interesting, and like I'm obsessed a little bit, like in a kind of a way. And she sort of brought through something when I was kind of looking at this notion of the way that deities even can influence us. And this is where I'll get into some personal stuff. You know, the deities have the power they are our teachers, but often the way that they teach doesn't feel so like slamtastic awesome. Like sometimes it feels like kind of like dodgy and dangerous. And that's not inviting you into dodgy and dangerous. It's just explaining that this kind of work with this kind of, you know, moving yourself through the different story structures in certain regions, you know, is going to have like its own treacherous aspects. And part of like that gnosis and coming out of that story with that knowing is being in these weird spaces where things are happening weirdly. And so, you know, when I called Hypatia forward to be like, how do I properly deal with this? Like, where's my power in this situation? Like, you know, I tend to be the observer, and I like it that way. But, you know, when something is confusing and I need to begin to know what it is to access my power and bring that power into it, like, what do I do here? Help me, you know? And so she showed me something, and I wrote it down. And when I wrote it down, and this is cool, and I hope whoever hears this begins to do this. It's just a suggestion, and only follow your own resonance and your own heart with suggestions as they come through. But she said to me, I use your imagination. And I was like, huh, you know, like, so she's like, okay, so I have the second sight or whatever. Like my mind is, I'm always having experiences like and seeing things, and it's just the way that my mind works. So she was like, what you have in the material world, you know, in the way of your imagination, can help you begin to figure out what it is that you want to make in terms of dinner, or a tool, you know what I mean? Or even just like create a story. Like you understand like what that is and that process is and how it works on the material plane. But she's like, but that ability and that process does something different on the spiritual plane, in the spiritual realm. And so part of what it is to know yourself and the capacity of your consciousness and to know what you are as a manifestor and to understand the power that you hold is to begin to enter imaginative spaces with a sense of your power. Because what we're talked out of when we're told, well, the imagination isn't real. No, it's just, it's nothing. You just have an imagination for the purpose of, little kids have nothing better to do than, interact with the universe by like dreaming and playing with, whatever, like whatever it is that talks you out of becoming an astronaut or becoming whatever it is that diminishes like those sparks that you're born with. She's saying that that in the spirit realm, and you see this with the technology of faith. So you see this with prayer warriors, you see this with prayer change, like prayer is like the medium of a lot of magic that we understand and that we've had experience with. But you know what it is to get into a group and pray, right? You understand like what that does. And the first two or more are gathered, like therein is like, it is true in heaven, I think it is, something like that. So what it is to sort of like, so she's showing me, like, I'm looking at diagnosis and I'm like, yeah, like, I don't, it's not that I had opposition. I wasn't understanding the shape-shifting. Like, I didn't get it. And he was trying to say, part of this is getting comfortable with like weirdness. You're going to have to start to get comfortable with weirdness and not be such a control freak. But I am a control freak. So yeah. So I'm working with Hypatia, and she says, like, what you can do with your imagination, like in the physical world, it has a different purpose and a different job, and it does something different in the spiritual realm. And so she's saying, you take control. You take control. You bring your imagination to this situation and you begin to move the pieces on the board. And so, it went from, Sofia, why are you putting me in a vulnerable position and like not saving my day? And like, I would like to be sitting in like the most comfortable little, sweatsuit with like a delicious, candy. Like, why are we having this experience instead of that experience? Like, you don't love me. You don't protect me. Like there is that like, edge that came into my voice and my feeling. But Hypatia is saying like, no, like you are meant to influence this situation. What you're perceiving in your unconscious mind, right? Because this is the second sight takes place in your unconscious mind. You're not seeing from the mind that sees. You're not seeing from the eyes that see. You're seeing from the unconscious eyeballs and the unconscious understanding. It's a separate mind. It participates with the mind that, is more centrally in my head, but there are two programs running at the same time. And so what she said is, she's like, why don't you manipulate this? Why don't you bring your power and your imagination into the scene, into the environment? And she kind of taught me so I started to sort of like bring in my imaginative capacity. And like, I began to really understand that I have incredible power. Any energy that wants to interact with me or wants to trick me is now subject to my own ability to like bring my energy, my imagination, and that imaginative capacity. And so when something comes up and says, hey, I'm here to bother you, and I'm here to frighten you, and I'm here to freak you out, suddenly I'm like, oh, actually, I'm going to close my eyes, see a giant glowing sword, and cut your head into 3 different pieces and then kick you back. And then I'm going to like open up a black hole, push you through it, and then zip that black hole up and then blow it away. And then I'm going to call in all of these helpful angels to come and ensure that there's no more leaking. Like that happening in my imagination, therefore translates to a spiritual reality. And so that's what it means to tap into your spiritual capacity. It's to sort of use another mind and use another dimension and do different kinds of work. And people who do spiritual work often understand this. But that's what we're being taught here. And so, what is this victory that we can have with our magic? The first is to understand that one of the tactics to talk us out of our influence over our physical reality and our reality writ large is to talk us into thinking the imagination is like no big deal. It's nothing. You don't need that. What's an imagination? Imaginations are so stupid. Are you a baby? Think about this messaging. Wherever you see a preponderance of hard work done by spiritual energies to kill off a certain human quality, therein lies its value and its power. So the ubiquitous effort to diminish the value of the imagination is basically to talk you out of your spiritual arsenal of powers and abilities. And because the worlds do like bleed over, and we're going to see that more and more. And so you're encouraged to do like visual journeying and to actually like do the imaginative work, because it more so than ever before, what it means for us to have this thinning veil. And we're going to be shown more and more examples of that can't be, that shouldn't be, I can't believe it, what does it mean, that's not true, this is true. And a lot of superpowers trying to vie for narrative control, and they will try to manufacture consent because that is how they operate. So you have to be using different eyes, and you have to be doing work from a different vantage point. And it's not asking you to venture into the realm of insanity. It's asking you to tap into a dimension of influence that you may not realize you have, and to just play with it. Just play. You're just being asked to play, because the power of the imagination is the vehicle into the world is through play. And that play is where all of our creativity is. And all of that creativity is the cosmos, is nature, is inspiration. That's those spiritual elements whispering the truth. How many inventions have taken place as a result of people just waking up with a dream in their head and saying, oh, periodic table, I see. That's like nature whispering its secrets to you. And so like we're invited into not only imagining, but like play. What do you think a ritual is? It's a container for your faith. What do you think play is? It's a container for your imaginative inspiration. And then through that container, like we begin to work with energy and experience our creative capacity in a different way. Because what we've been shown like we're capable of is a counterfeit of what we actually are. And so we have to play with what's going on in order to begin to feel the effects of this. And so like, you know, my truth coming in is that I feel effects of this all the time. I have spiritual experiences that are freaking insane, that aren't just like my own autistic conceptual synesthesia. My autistic conceptual synesthesia is a really cool quirk of the brain, but I learned really young that it could be validated at a material level, and that meant something, and that there was some kind of like you know, like there was something to it. And so I can tell you that there is such a thing as making water into a wine. Can I make water into wine? No, I don't need to. That's like not of interest to me. But there have been times when I've been able to do superhuman things. And that's me like saying something that scares people, makes people uncomfortable. It's not like a good admission. And it's also not like something that you should think is like, wow, spectacle, cool. Impossible things that I've done aren't really powerful. You know what I mean? Like they just so happen to like be like something that defines or confounds like realities, edicts, and laws. And so that puts me in a category where I exist, and therefore other things must exist, and that my interaction with these other things that exist are validated, and then I can't really argue them. And that, you know, that just changes things. And I can say that that's possible for everyone. I can just be the ambassador of that. And I don't really need to prove anything, because this isn't proselytizing, and I'm not trying to win you over to a belief system or like extort, you know, your efforts into like no, I'm saying you create the container for your faith, and then that faith operates in a way that operates like a placebo pill. And it's a universal journey, but it's your journey, you know, and you're the one who's in charge. You're in your body, you know, you're feeling from that place of your own intuition. And it's always going to be, does this feel right? Does this feel wrong? Because something that is right could feel wrong because you're not ready for it. You don't need to be there, and it's just going to hurt you to do this. And so it doesn't have to, having to be right is what Diagnosis is coming in to say, like, you guys gotta shed that. That's not gonna work. That doesn't work with having to be right and magic. Like, these things are not, because it's a conceptual, it's a much different process. And so when we think about the competition for our energy, the competition for our attention, it's not that we have to stop hosting the things that, like, you know, we're used to being around and like being, you know, influenced by. It's that we should be watching our influences and deciding the same way we decide not to eat a Twinkie with poison in it, and instead go for the health food store banana muffin. Like, it's an energetic version of that. You're not being told you're bad, you're naughty, you're evil, and all of your fleshly sins and things, you know, no, you're being told, like, be in the body, make choices about what energies you host and the consciousness that you are interacting with, because you're interacting with a consciousness and you are hosting things all the time. You're hosting your coffee in the morning. So make energetic choices about what you choose to hold and to co-create with. And the body belongs to nature. So again, like there's a wisdom there, and there's energy within the energies. Like there's so much for you to learn in organic ways that don't include spectacle, and that don't include status, and that don't include dominating beliefs. You're stepping out of all of that, and it's fighting in a very different way than we've been taught to. And so with this Three of Coins being about building a new structure to hold faith in an egalitarian way, and in a not competitive, comparison, deterministic, have to be right kind of a way, but really in a way that's imagination and play. Because what Hypatia said to me when she was kind of teaching me that like my imagination is literally like an enormous crazy weapon that I had no idea did weaponly things. I kind of knew it, you know, but I didn't really know it. And she said, your imagination is the most powerful tool you can lend the world, because it is what creates the world. And the reason why I quoted her here is because she was like skinned alive for being a woman who had persuasive power and intellect. She was you know, a renowned philosopher and mathematician. I think I really have to look because I should know this, but she's amazing. Like I know from like encountering her in the spirit world, like she's incredible. She was like skinned alive by like her day's version of like Christian nationalists. She was dragged on the street and then skinned alive, and then it was a sacrifice. You know, you have to think about the power structure that is in place, especially the spiritual power structure that is in place. And you have to look at what the spiritual power structure that is in place says about sacrifice, because it's very important. It's very important when we're looking at deities. And we're looking at like the God of supremacy, which is the problem that we're encountering right now. Everybody that you encounter that has like an adherent, obsessive belief system because they've had these spiritual experiences with religious technology, and they think that that makes their God right in every way. And I will die on this hill because I've had that I've had that release, I've had that intimacy, so I know that this story is true and I will die for the story. That's of course a distortion. That technology and that release and that experience is anywhere where there's seekers and there are spiritual stories to move yourself through and have catharsis with. Like, it's just technology, it's universal. It's not the specifics of the story, it's the story structure that you work your way through. I just repeat that because it's so important, because you know, when I see what they did to Hypatia, like I want to channel her, and not just channel her, but like, you know, be able to say like, this is her quote, they took her voice, but I can be her voice, I can stand in that space. And there's something interesting about like what it means to encounter and think about channeling as like, not just for, you know, it's for giving voice to that which like didn't have voice to a certain extent. So, you know, that just comes in like as a personal aside, but you know, she's basically saying, so I'll just repeat it. Your imagination is the most powerful tool you can lend the world because it is what creates the world. So you start there. You don't have to start with world domination. You start with the tool that creates the world. And you start teaching people how to use the tool that creates the world in a way that brings coherence. So, you know, we go from building a new cathedral, building a temple, based on gnosis, knowing truth, but not the kind of truth that's deterministic and that has to do with comparison and domination. A different kind of experience at coming at truth, experiencing truth, and we might have to reinvent the way that we think about truth a little bit. And I know that that's a far stretch, but she's showing me, no, it's cool. It's really cool. And so with this Four of Swords, you know, being about this is a healing process that, you know, divesting in the web that we're caught in is like almost one strand at a time. And we're going to be feeling ourselves, or even our bodies, in like a different way, with a different kind of a feeling. And then this Emperor here, you know, like this is the empire. This is the power structure. You know, we're taking this leap of faith with a creative process, taking a leap of faith with a creative process. Because that inspiration, like, you know, so basically what Sofia is saying, even Dionysus is saying, because you're what you often think are the scary things are also your teachers on this journey. You know, and even like, you know, if you're a born witch and you have you've experienced physical manifestations of your power, and I know that a lot of you have many different ways in which we experience physical manifestations of our power. You know, this came through a TikTok, and it's going to come through another TikTok because I'm going to have to put it up with this as I'm led to. And these are not easy things to post because, man, like they make me feel like I'm naked on stage, I'll be honest with you. But those of us who have had physical manifestations of our faith that are so undeniable as to be a daily like occurrence, those of us that can't deny the existence of like an unseen realm because we literally can physically interact with it. And there are those of us who have had little experiences like this, and then there are those of us who have like daily experiences like this. This is something that you have to know, that if you're in this position, you're not powerless in this position. You have a creative ability that's almost godlike in this position. From the vantage point of in the unseen realms, the unseen tools are unseen tools that you wield with that imagination. And so, you know, this is where Dionysus was showing me the shape-shifting, and then Hypatia was showing me how to work with my imagination to get a clearer picture, and how to work with my imagination to like disqualify things that shouldn't be bothering me or interfering with me. That interplay of like, you know, I'm like losing the thread a little bit because it's a lot, but essentially like your spiritual experiences, like you're meant to have those experiences, but you're meant to have those experiences as the person who has power in that situation. So that's when it comes in, and there was this thing that came through the TikTok that I'm going to post, that's like, are you being tricked, or are you like working with the mother and the trickster itself? Like, what role are you actually in this situation when you look at yourself as having power, when you take that power, and when you're not in a position of deference, because deference is not a part of what happens like in the imagination, or it shouldn't. And if it is, ask yourself why, and what's the utility, and what is the deference for, and who's taking the energy that deference is providing, and for what? Because like coming back to what we were saying about like the gods that are now in power, the god of supremacy that, you know, is wielding its horrible swords. Like, and this is where I keep on losing the channel, which is why whenever that happens, I know that there's interference. Oh, here's why. Ask anyone. Interference. It's okay. Ask anyone who has a belief system that is ends justify the means. Ends justify the means. Ends justify the means. If it includes human sacrifice, that is not a good God. Ends justify the means. If it includes child sacrifice, that is not a good God. And if the gods of the gods of supremacy, the gods of patriarchy, the gods of hierarchy are demanding human and child sacrifice, if capitalism demands human and child sacrifice, then who are you worshiping? Look at the fruit. What gods demand human and child sacrifice? What gods do that? Because this is where the shape-shifting becomes really important. This is where identifying what shape-shifting is in that dimension really means. Because it can take on the mantle of light. It can look like, you know, the king of all kings, but if it's demanding human or child sacrifice, then its name probably isn't Prince of Peace. And so, you know, this is a really important thing that we're looking at here with, like, our victory is in entering into this with the magician, this arena of one step at a time. We take our baby foot and our baby step and we go, okay, I'm going to allow myself to sort of interact with the imaginative field and call divinity into it, however you feel comfortable with that. Take this inspiration that I'm being given and create victory. It's hard to speak. Yes, like a lot going on. And create victory here. So this is where it's co-creation. You agree to pray. Any magic that you're comfortable with. It can be prayer, or it could be a spell, or it can be, again, you're just trying to find a container that can hold your faith in a way that you can believe into what you're trying to create with this alchemically. You want release. You want the universe to take care of you so you can learn and teach and seek. You know, you set your intention. And you bring that intention to whatever alchemy is going to help carry your faith. And so, you know, whether you enter into prayer, or you enter into writing, or you enter into spell work, or you make a sacred space, like separate the profane from the sacred. You create that sacred space. And in that sacred space, you open yourself to inspiration. And as that inspiration comes through, you create with it. And whatever you create with it, you create towards your own victory. The ingredient is faith, a leap of faith. There's an aspect of faith, but you create from a position of, I am powerful and I can have victory. You're not going to co-create your domination. That's ugly magic, and ugly magic makes for ugly results. So you're not going to sit there and be like, oh, my coworker, you know, really injustice, you know what I mean? And begin to like do some magic, because you can't trust your logical sight, you know, in a certain kind of a way. Like this, there's a lot to that. I mean, we can get into defensive magic and like all the types of ways in which magic can really screw you up if you do it wrong. You know, to hold that kind of power and wield it against another human being without realizing the infrastructure that moves through them and like what they're dealing with in the way of hollowed out damage is just stupid. You're just going to hurt them and you're going to hurt yourself, because that's a bad use of it. But if you begin to step into this in terms of having the right intention, courting seeking the right information, being in your body, being at the and don't feel bad if you've done like stupid things. Like I didn't mean to like, basically what I'm saying is this is all a learning curve. This is all a learning process. And we get power commensurate to what we ask for in, you know, and if we ask for something that we shouldn't be having the power, we're going to just get enough power to stumble and have to learn. And, you know, so there's a lot there, but like when we are like looking from this like vantage point of like, I want to bring my creative energy, my creative capacity into my life to create the kind of world that is supporting me. And that means taking that first step of faith, utilizing prayer, spell, whatever your container is, and then being open to this inspiration and having that inspiration fuel victory in one way or another. That means that the inspiration that comes in is going to be an array of ingredients related to your victory that might not even make sense to you initially. There might be a mystery there, but you're solving this mystery with your imagination. You're solving this mystery and you're interacting with the unseen, and you're knowing that your imagination, if you feel a little bit scared, conjure up a big, huge, flying sword dragon, because you can. And play with it, you know, and I know we talk about this stuff all the time, and it's like, yeah, I agree. Yeah. No, like there's something so incredibly important about getting these tools like sharpened and managed. That is the change we want to bring, you know, and like, so you play with it, there's an inspiration, you like learn and like move this towards whatever victory that you are invested in. And again, we're not doing ends justify the means in a way that harms anybody. We're doing like an openness to like a labyrinth process of learning and evolving. And there are going to be things that are challenging, but those things that are challenging, to find what you're capable of based on the effort that you put into it, you will see the effects. This is a cause and effect kind of a situation. And I'm actually drawn to a different deck. This is a cause and effect kind of a situation. And it's also a one, you know, we're removing one like piece of, this is a web, and we're removing one piece at a time. It is a process. There are traps set around our like value and what we have to offer. There's venom and destroyers like all over the place, and that's not so that you can be afraid. It's so that you can learn how to use that imagination to put these things in their place, because you're actually asked to use a tool that you've been talked out of. Why have you been talked out of it? What was that about? What does that threaten? And it can be difficult, you know. Like it is difficult, you know, like it's incredibly difficult, because you want to manage your energy in such a way where you're not evacuating your body, and you're not you're careful with diagnosis. You know, when we're going into the spiritual stuff, when we're kind of like straddling, you know, the divide between the two worlds, like when we are working with the unconscious mind, like that means attending to the energy of diagnosis with care, and bringing in energies like Sofia or your ascended guides, or, you know, energies that you know can be your mentors and can teach you through this learning process. Because it's not duality the way that you think of duality. It's not about conquering evil. It's about like understanding how this like might be your teacher to a certain extent, but ultimately something that like in overcoming, you then overcome. You overcome it for yourself, you overcome it for others. And it's a process, you know, and it's a process that You have to manage in a responsible way. So like, I bring that in because like, I always worry with this stuff because it's mystery school stuff, like, that I'm learning with Sofia and the ancient Gnostics. Like, it's all mystery school stuff. And the mystery school stuff says, you do have like a role in taking dominion over your world and holding that space with the divine feminine energies. But yeah, there's a lot to it. There's a whole lot to this. And I think we're going to probably leave it here for now, since this is a full, like, maybe 2.5 hours of viewing. Yeah. Let's take it to that point. Let's just be there, because there are limitations. And let me just get a couple more cards and then we can kind of let this be. Your inheritance, like that. Yeah, this is unique. This keeps on, this card comes out like every single time I use this deck. We all have unique abilities, and there is a lot that we're going to be working our way through here. Let me just look at this. So I'm being shown, as I look at this, the moon card. I'm still kind of learning this deck, so I just like feel it. I don't really know. Like, it's all intuition, in the beginning with a new deck. But there's a unique gift that's coming through, that will come through this process, that will come through this practice. Your inheritance is to enlighten, is to be enlightened, and it is to enlighten. The limitations that we're facing right now are very real, but we have a lot more power, and we have a lot more, like, let me just get a couple cards, because I'm like seeing something that's like very hard for me to convey. Just like a couple more on that law of limitation. What do you want to show me? Because the Emperor is where we have healing, and then we have the Emperor. And so healing the Emperor is part of this process. And that's where, I think it's really important for those of you who are born witches, those of you who like have gotten to the place with their magic where it's like you can physically, it's physically manifested, to think about the fact that healing is healing the Emperor to a certain extent. That's part of where you may be positioned. You might be positioned close enough, to the Empire in one way or another, that your influence is significant, and to not discount your influence under some kind of sense of like a subjugation that isn't there. Yeah, this is the North Node. There will be success and benefit from this process. But the 7th house, these law limitations, and these limitations are relational in relationship to, and this is what we're gonna probably start working on like for the next week, is this notion of that the limitations exist to be managed in relationship. Those limitations are there. And they exist to be like, this is where the magic comes into relationship somehow. It's in relationship to, with the 7th house energy. So there's success to be had in stepping into your inheritance, understanding your divinity and the power that you hold in your creative capacity through that tool of imagination that works in the unseen realm in a way that it doesn't work tangibly, but works. And that the limitations that do exist are in relationship, but in relationship is also where we have the most power in some ways to bring that wisdom of the heart, because part of this task that we're tasked with is healing the Emperor. So we're going to leave that there. Bottom of the deck we have in Pisces, spirituality. We're going to leave it there, and let's just be in some harmony with each other. We have the universal harmony here. This is a lot of information. This is a lot that's come through this week, but I'm kind of excited and I sort of love it. So I'll see you guys again next week. And we're coming up on our group reading on, I think it's April 5th. It is April 5th, I'm pretty sure. Looking forward to that. And so I want you to have all of your questions for Sofia ready for that reading, because we're going to do kind of a Q&A with her. We've done a big chunk of study with her by April 5th, and we're going to Q&A. So I want you to get your questions together for that reading. All right, it's so good to be with you guys. It always is. And I'll see you again next week.